Tu podcast diario de inglés.
Welcome back, deep divers. Today we're diving into something that I think a lot of you might relate to. We're looking at those common errors, those little slip-ups that Spanish speakers often make when they're learning English.
Interesting.
And before anyone starts thinking this is about, being perfect or anything like that,
Right.
it's really not. It's more about understanding those kind of tricky parts where our brains, they're trying to blend these two beautiful languages.
Yeah, it is fascinating, isn't it? Like, you can almost see how the native language is shaping the way that people think in English.
It really is. It's almost like our brains are kind of solving a puzzle.
Absolutely.
They're trying to figure out, like, okay, how do I say this in this new language? So you might catch yourself saying things like I have 20 years
Yeah.
instead of I am 20 years old, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's directly from the Spanish tengo 20 años. So it makes perfect sense. It's just that in English we express it a little differently.
A little differently, yeah. And it's those moments, those aha moments where you realize, oh, okay,
Yeah.
English does this differently. That's where the learning happens, I think.
It is. It's not just about, vocabulary. It's
Right.
about grasping those patterns in the language and even like those idiomatic expressions.
Exactly. It's almost like learning to enjoy a new type of food. You know what I mean? You're tasting all these different spices and flavors.
I like that. Yeah.
But speaking of challenges, let's talk about some sounds. Sounds that can really trip people up.
Yeah.
The "the" sound, for example.
Yes.
Oh, that's a tough one.
The T is notorious. And, of course, that sound doesn't exist in Spanish. So
Right.
it's natural to want to replace it with a D or a T sound.
Right.
But it's almost like if you think of it as training your tongue for like a new skill or even a new sport.
I like that. The tongue needs to get in shape.
Yeah, exactly.
It's doing its own workout at the language gym.
Exactly.
Now, and speaking of working out,
Yeah.
let's tackle another area where English and Spanish, they kind of have a little bit of a grammatical, I don't know, tug of war maybe.
Okay.
Word order.
Yes. Word order is fascinating because it shows you how a language kind of thinks,
Right.
And in English, we like that subject-verb-object structure.
We do.
Spanish, it's a bit more flexible.
It is. So you wouldn't say, for instance, house white. You'd say White House.
Yeah.
And it's those little things that make such a big difference.
You do.
I think in how clear you are.
Yes. And reading can be really helpful for that because the more you read in English,
Yes.
the more you just start to get a sense for how English sentences flow, how those words naturally fall into place.
It's like training your brain to think in English word order.
Well, yeah. Good.
But speaking of tricky grammar, can we talk about articles for a second?
Articles. Yes. Those little words, a, and the.
Our trouble.
They can be a real challenge for Spanish speakers.
They are.
I mean, they are for many English language learners as well.
I know. I know. I used to overuse the all the time. I would say things like the people is happy and some people are happy, and it's a subtle difference, but you can really see how articles they work differently in the two languages.
They do. And it comes down to how we think of nouns.
Okay.
Like in English, we tend to think about, are they countable, are they uncountable?
Right.
And that influences how we use articles.
So it's not just about remembering rules.
Right.
It's about understanding kind of the deeper concept behind those rules.
Exactly.
It's like you said, it's like seeing the logic behind the language. And sometimes that means kind of letting go of those direct translations that our brains want to hold on to.
Yes.
It's like realizing that a square is still a square even if it's turned on its side.
Oh, I like that.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's about shifting your perspective
Yeah.
and seeing how English, carves up the world a bit differently.
Okay, so we've talked about those direct translations. We've talked about some of those tricky sounds, word order, the world of articles.
Mm-hmm.
But let's dive into a topic that I think can really make people nervous.
Okay.
Phrasal verbs.
Yes, phrasal verbs. They can be a challenge,
They can.
but they're so versatile. They add so much to the English language.
It's like they have their own secret code almost.
Right.
You think you understand the verb,
Yeah.
and then you add a preposition, and the meaning totally changes.
Completely.
Like take the verb look, for instance.
Okay.
You have look for, you have look after, you have look forward to. Each one, the preposition just completely changes what that verb means.
It does. And the best way to really tackle those isn't through lists or anything. It's by encountering them naturally.
Okay.
Seeing how they're used in real conversations.
So that's where things like reading and listening to, podcasts and things.
Exactly.
That becomes really valuable.
It is.
Because you're hearing it in action.
Yes, you're immersing yourself in the language.
You are. It's like watching someone do a new dance step.
Yeah, I like that.
And you're trying to learn it by watching them.
Exactly. You're getting that feel for the rhythm of the language.
You are.
Yeah.
But speaking of rhythm, let's tackle another area where I think Spanish and English, they have their own kind of distinct beats.
Tenses.
Yes, tenses. They're like the timekeepers of the language.
They are. But sometimes those timekeepers, they seem to be playing tricks on us, don't they? For example, the present perfect tense.
I think that could be really tricky for Spanish speakers.
It can be a tricky one.
Because it doesn't have a direct equivalent in Spanish.
Right. It's not just about when the action happened.
Right.
It's about its relevance to now, to the present moment.
So it's not just the when, it's the how it connects to now.
Exactly. And mastering that really means, understanding the nuances of how English uses it.
Right.
It's not about just translating it directly from Spanish.
Right. It's like we have to learn to look at time a little differently.
We do.
And speaking of looking at things differently, let's shift our focus to another pair of words that can trip people up sometimes.
Okay.
Make versus do.
Yeah, make versus do.
Classic.
A classic problem.
A classic problem. And I think this is, in Spanish you have the wonderful hacer, which covers both.
Yes.
But in English we have this split between make and do. And sometimes it seems so random.
It can seem arbitrary, but there are some general guidelines that can help. So make often has to do with, creating something, constructing something. And do is more related to actions or tasks.
Okay. So you'd say make a cake, but do your homework.
Exactly.
Okay. So it's like each verb has its own little territory.
They do.
In the world of actions.
Yes.
Okay. So if we can sort of figure out those general ideas,
right,
it can make those verbs a little easier to manage.
It can. Yeah. It's like having a compass to help you through the jungle of English verbs.
Right. Speaking of jungles, let's venture into another one that can be a little tricky.
Okay.
Prepositions.
Oh, yes. Prepositions. Tiny words, but they can change the whole meaning of a sentence.
I really can. It's like they have like a secret power or something in, on, at, to, for all of those. And they can be really tricky for Spanish speakers because they don't always translate directly.
No, they don't. And they're often idiomatic, which means it's more about, established phrases than hard and fast rules.
So you'd say, for instance, I'm at school.
Yeah.
But I'm in the classroom.
Exactly.
And those little distinctions can be tough,
They can.
to figure out at first. So what are some ways that we can kind of get better with prepositions? What do you think?
Well, I think paying attention to how they're used in different contexts is key.
Okay.
So that means reading, listening to podcasts, watching movies, anything where you can hear those prepositions in action.
So you're training your ear to pick up on those little clues.
Exactly.
All right. But speaking of training, we can't forget about pronunciation.
Of course not. Pronunciation is key.
It is.
For clear communication.
Right.
And it can be a real challenge when a sound doesn't exist in your native language.
Right, like the P.
With a P, it requires you to put your tongue in a specific place. Yeah. And it can feel very strange.
It can. So what do we do?
Well, think of it as a physical skill.
Okay.
It takes practice. It takes repetition. Yeah, to train your muscles, basically, to make that sound correctly.
It's like learning to play an instrument.
Yeah, exactly.
You wouldn't expect to pick up, a saxophone and play, a perfect song on the first try.
You wouldn't, no.
And it's the same with sounds.
It is.
Don't be afraid to try them out, even if it feels a little awkward.
Yeah.
The more you do it, the more natural it'll become.
Absolutely.
It's like giving your tongue permission to explore this new soundscape.
I like that.
Of English. But speaking of exploration, one of the most amazing things about learning a language, I think, is how it opens up new worlds of culture and connection.
It really does.
It does. It does.
It gives you access to a whole new way of seeing the world.
Yes. It really is like adding another dimension to your map of the world, you know.
Absolutely.
And speaking of maps, sometimes it feels like we need a map to navigate those tricky verbs, those phrasal verbs, those verbs that change meaning depending on what preposition comes after them.
Right. They're a constant source of both, fascination and a bit of a headache.
They are. I remember really struggling with verbs like look.
Yeah.
Which can mean so many different things depending on whether you look for, look after, look forward to something.
Exactly. And I think the key is to really see those as units of meaning, not try to dissect them word by word.
Okay.
So look after is a chunk.
Right.
It's a concept.
Okay. So we have to learn it.
Yes.
As one whole thing.
As one whole thing.
Okay.
It's like learning a new dance move, you have to see the whole step.
Yes.
Not just, the individual foot movement.
Exactly. And the best way to learn those dance moves is by watching them in action. Right. By seeing them in real conversations, in real situations.
Exactly.
And that's where, again, immersing ourselves in that authentic English content really comes into play.
Absolutely.
But sometimes, even when we study, we practice, there's that little voice that creeps in that says, what if I make a mistake?
Of course. That's natural.
It is. It's like that feeling when you're about to jump into a cold pool.
Yes.
You'll be fine once you're in, but there's that moment of hesitation.
That initial fear.
Yes, exactly. So how do we deal with that?
Well, think of it this way. Every time you make a mistake, you're actually learning something.
Okay.
You're getting feedback on what works and what doesn't.
So it's valuable.
It's valuable, yeah. It's like those funny fail videos you see online.
Right.
You know, it's funny, but it's also a learning experience.
It is.
So instead of being afraid of mistakes, embrace them.
See them as opportunities to grow.
Yeah, it's like having your own little language coach.
Exactly.
Right there with you, pointing out the things you can work on. But speaking of coaches,
yes,
I think having a good community can make a huge difference.
It can.
When you're learning a language.
Absolutely.
Connecting with other learners, online or in person.
Yes.
It gives you that encouragement, that motivation.
It does.
That sense of we're all in this together.
Yeah, you're not alone.
You're not alone. You can share those aha moments.
Right.
And even the struggles.
Absolutely. It makes the journey much more enjoyable when you have that support.
It does. And even having a language partner or a tutor.
Yeah, someone who can give you that personalized guidance.
Yeah, someone who can kind of be your guide, on this language journey.
And I think it's important to remember it's not about, reaching this destination of perfect fluency.
Right.
It's more about enjoying the journey.
It is.
It's about that continuous learning.
It's a lifelong process, really.
It is. It really is. It's like exploring this huge, ever-changing forest, It's always something new.
Always something new to discover.
A new path to take, a new way of looking at things.
And it's interesting how learning another language can actually help you understand your own native language better.
Oh, that's so true.
It's like you're stepping outside of your own culture and then coming back and seeing things with fresh eyes.
Yes, it's like seeing your own reflection in a new light.
Exactly.
Well, it looks like we've come to the end of our deep dive here.
It has been a fascinating exploration.
It really has. So for all of you deep divers out there, remember those mistakes.
Yeah.
They're part of the process.
They are.
Embrace them. Learn from them, celebrate your progress.
And have fun with it.
Absolutely. Just keep that curiosity going.
Absolutely.
That's what it's all about. Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive. So until next time, happy language learning, everyone.
Happy learning.